Hi, welcome to this lesson. So in this lesson, we are going to create our very first program. That is, we're just going to look further into what the component is, what the decorators are. I'm going to explain it a little bit more, and then we are going to just make some changes in the code and see how it gets displayed. Right, so let's get right into it then. Alright then, so before we get started with this though, what I want to talk about is I want to show you that it's generally not good to have the same code. Okay, this is a huge code and it doesn't, most of the time you're probably not going to want to use this because it's not to your preferences. So what I do is I'll just have the div in here and I'm gonna remove everything because that's what I generally do. So before the style, we are going to have to find this. Right, so just remove this. And similarly, I like to create my own styles as well. So we already know HTML and CSS, so we don't need them to create it for us. So what I do is I just create a clean slate to start with, and you can test it out by having a h1 or something like that, just a h1. Okay, something like this, and save this. And if you look at the output right now, see, everything has been cleaned out and you just have just a heading in h1 right now. Okay, so you can create your own stylings later on, and of course in here just make sure that you're looking for all of the unsaved. So if something is being shown as unsaved, go to that file and just save it. Sometimes if something is unsaved, the output could get affected, right? All right, so now that we've cleaned out things, we can start fresh. So there you go. So you have this, right? You have this title right here. And one of the easiest ways of doing this is just by going in here and just putting that title within two curly braces like this. Okay, so within two curly braces, place the name of the property that you just created. And of course, it has to have some value assigned to it, which it does have. So if you just look at the output, see, it says crash course. Now if you change crash course to something else, if you just say title like this, then it would automatically change. Now this is the dynamic aspect. So now you have a dynamic property added to your HTML directly. So whenever the value changes because of something, we can have it change because of a button click or anything like that in the future. So whenever it changes, it's going to reflect that in here. Okay, so that's one thing out of the way. Now the next is I want to go in here and I want to talk about this decorator right here. So I didn't really explain it in detail in the last lesson. Let me just do that now. So you have three parts. So you have the template. The template represents the UI or the HTML. All right. And then you have the class, which is just the code that supports the view. All right. So it supports the view. So it's the TypeScript, it has the data properties, which one of the properties you just looked at it. So data or properties, they're both the same. And then it has the methods that manipulate those properties, right? So this is the logic of the view. And of course you have your styles as well. So all of these things are actually metadata. So it's just info that Angular needs to decide if a class is an Angular component or not. So if you don't have this in a class, okay, if you have a TS file, right, and if you don't have this decorator, this component decorator in this exact same name, then your browser would not know that it's an Angular component. Now, if it's an Angular component, you can just take this value and place it in HTML. You can do things like that. That's the simplest thing you can do, but you can do things like that. But if this decorator is not placed there, then your browser would not know that it's an Angular component, so it would not let you do things like this. Okay, so that's the main difference. And of course, you have your selector. So as I told you about selector, it's a custom HTML tag that can be used to represent the component. In the index.html I showed you, right? I showed you this app root, right? So that was the custom tag that I just showed you right now. So you can name this anything you want. It's gonna work. Just make sure that you replace whatever you change this with in the HTML that you're placing it in. All right. So that's it. That's how it works. So you already saw that you can create a property in here. So you can go ahead and create a new property and you can place that as well. So for example, let's say I have something called greet and it's going to be just hello world, and go to your HTML. Let's have a h2 and that's going to be just greet. There we go. Look at the output. Oh, I'm getting an error in here. Why? So if you get an error, you can just come in here and you can see what's happening. I probably forgot to save this. See? Yeah. Because it's not recognizing greet as a property. So now it works and you're going to get this right here. See? Hello world in H2. So that's how you get your output. Now that we've done that, why don't I create a new show you how to create a new component, and we can work with that. I mean, just go press plus, because this first node component, it's running the server, so it has to keep running, okay, the development server. So let's create a new component. ng, G for generate, C for component, and I'm gonna call this test. So why am I doing this? Well, it's just a simple thing that I just want to show you. So every time you create a new component, and by default it's going to be created inside of the app. If you want to change the folder, then you have to make sure that you give slash something then slash test, like that. Okay, so I just wanted it in the root component, so I just gave test in here. So every time you create a new component, you're going to get the CSS for that, which is going to be empty, the HTML for that, which is going to have the name of the component works as default, and then you're going to have the test file, which we'll look at later on, and of course you're going to have the TypeScript. It's going to have the same decorator. So for this one, the decorator is app test. So there's your template URL, there's everything. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this to H1 and change this to H1 as well, and I'll just take this off. And remember, in our app component we were placing these things. I'm just gonna remove all of these, and I'm just going to have greet in here. I'm going to change that to 1. All right, so the first one is going to say hello there. The next line, I'm going to ask how are you name. Okay, so I'm going to make this how are you name. Of course it's going to be an error right now because I haven't really created name. Just go here and let's create name, and it's going to be John, like this. All right, so that's the test component. Let's go ahead and save this as well. So anything else that has been unsaved, right? I'm done now. So now we have a new component, but if you look at the output right now, you'll only get hello world, and that's because this component that we just created, it hasn't been embedded inside of your root component, inside of your root module and all of those things. So we have to do that to start with. Now first of all, go to the module, the parent module of this component, which in our case is the app module, and let's import it just like we've imported this right here, just like we've imported. But by default, when I create the component, it's going to import it inside of the module by default. So the test component has been imported. Make sure that it's inside of the declarations. Yes, it is. Okay. Also, go back to your test and make sure that the component has been exported as well. Yep, it has been exported. So now you have to learn how to include this component in the output. So for that, go and get this custom tag that you have right here, this app test tag, right? Get it? And just go to your next level component right here and just place it. That's it. There you go. Just save this. Go and check your compilation. Yes, it's compiled perfectly. There you go. It says, hello, how are you, John? So this is how you create a new component, and this is how you use the data of the component in your main component. Okay, so now we've created our project. So far we've created projects, we've looked at the files, we've looked at how to manipulate the data in such a way that you can place your dynamic data inside of your HTML directly. We've also looked at creating new components, within modules. So and also how to use them in your parent component. Okay, and that's pretty much it for this particular lesson. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.